All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on fibro and food, diet, and nutrition for fibromyalgia. I'm Nicole from Swing Care, and I'm so excited to welcome back Dr. Ginevra Liptan and Dr. Andrea Chadwick today to talk about food. We all love talking about it, but I know there's a lot of conflicting information out there when it comes to diet and fibro. So really looking forward to diving in with our experts today. And just a little bit of background, Dr. Liptan is a board certified in internal medicine and trained in functional medicine, a holistic approach that combines both Western and alternative medicine. And after developing fibromyalgia as a medical student, Dr. Liptan spent many years using herself as a guinea pig to find successful treatments and has really fine-tuned her approach by treating thousands of patients. She's also the author of the FibroManual and the Fibro Food Formula. And Dr. Chadwick is medical director of Swing Care and double board certified in anesthesiology and pain medicine. Her clinical expertise focuses on complex centralized pain syndromes, including fibromyalgia. She's also the director of the Fibromyalgia and Centralized Pain Exploration Lab at the University of Kansas Medical Center. So welcome again to you both. We had such a great conversation previously. So I recommend people check those out on our YouTube channel. We have good conversations on sleep and on fibromyalgia research up to date. So just wanted to dive into nutrition and food while we have you today. And to kind of kick things off, I wanted to ask kind of why diet plays a role in fibro treatment. We're talking about Dr. Chadwick, centralized pain conditions. So if we're thinking about that, why is food so important?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, but I always look at other medical conditions as well to say, food can be medicine for a lot of different people. And when you look at people who have hypertension or certain types of kidney disorders, they have to follow certain diets to make sure that their conditions are well managed. Or if you think about people with diabetes, they have to follow certain types of diets as well to make sure that their medical condition is managed appropriately. And I really feel that for fibromyalgia, which again is a chronic condition, as you mentioned, it has a centralized pain state, meaning that the brain is very important in how pain is processed, and it drives and maintains the pain in patients with fibromyalgia. But if you think about fueling the body, we're also fueling the brain. And when you look at diet and food as medicine, then you really take into account just the importance of what we're putting into our bodies daily to not only nourish ourselves, but also to give our body the right type of fuel to help that centralized pain state and improve.
But I would just say globally, what I see with patients is diet is really important for inflammation. And if we're eating foods that are inflammatory, it amplifies our pain. So I think the first thing is sort of figuring out what foods for you have some inflammatory aspects. And it's not the same for everybody. But the second thing is fueling our cells well. So usually that's like increasing protein. And then there's some interesting kind of studies looking at things like the keto diet or, very specific kind of strict types of diet. And I think it can be very overwhelming as a patient when you're looking at it, because it's like, wait, I'm supposed to eat lots of that. No, beans are bad. I'm not supposed to eat beans, and it can be very challenging to figure out, while at the same time you're dealing with limited energy and trying to, actually figure out how to logistically feed yourself. But I will answer the one study that actually I just was looking at recently was a study on gluten-free diet in fibromyalgia. And that's a big one. A lot of people talk about avoiding gluten. And in this study, they had people with fibromyalgia avoid gluten for 6 months. Then they gave them gluten back for 3 months and then had them avoid it for 6 months. And during the time period when they were off gluten, the majority of folks had improvement in their widespread pain index. So basically the centralized pain went down. So it doesn't mean everybody is sensitive to gluten, but that study was really interesting because I think it was pretty well done and did give us some support for like, well, maybe people should look at avoiding gluten, or at least a trial of it to see if their symptoms get better.
Yeah, I can just pipe in also and say that there's some really great systematic reviews on the types of diets that are helpful with fibromyalgia. And I'm a huge proponent of you know your body best because there's, I mean, just like you mentioned, there's like every fad diet out there. I mean, I had a almond mom growing up. Like it's, you know, remember like Snackwell's cookies? They tasted horrible, but they were good for you.
Yeah.
You know, it's there's all these fads that can come along. But when you look really at these systematic reviews, you know, they mention a variety of different diets that have been studied. And so I tend to talk to my patients about, well, you know, there's not just one diet that you can explore as a person interested in helping their fibromyalgia from a lifestyle modification standpoint. There's been studies on vegan and vegetarian diets, and we know that those diets tend to be very anti-inflammatory. You're not getting a lot of processed foods, not a lot of preservatives, and then a lot of those inflammation kind of driving foods like gluten or dairy or certain types of meats can you know, you can decide, hey, well, I really don't really care about eating meat. I don't eat a lot of meat anyway, so maybe following more of a vegan and vegetarian diet would be better. Or, you know, I really like a well-balanced diet with protein and grains, etc. And so maybe the anti-inflammatory or Mediterranean diet are more helpful. And so those systematic reviews are nice because I feel like they give like a buffet of ideas patients. Did you like what I did there?
Very good.
um, of hey, like there are a lot of options here, and it's not a one size fits all type of approach because just like you mentioned, everybody responds to different foods differently. That has to do with genetic components, our bacterial you know, our internal bacterial systems, what's that called? Like your microbiome.
Microbiome. Yep. Yep.
I mean, if we could get all the answers about what each of us should eat on a regular basis to feel our best, whoever would do that would be very, very well off.
Right. They win a Nobel Prize or
Right.
something.
But in the meantime, you know, it's just like you mentioned, you just give people options and let them, you know, kind of explore these different diets. And the studies have been those, especially those systematic reviews, have really helped me synthesize the data because for the layperson who might be listening here, you know, our community, a systematic review is where researchers take very high level papers on topics and they review all of the literature and then they succinctly gather information, grade the amount of bias and the level of evidence. So systematic reviews are some of the highest level quality papers that we as physicians and clinicians can access. And so, you know, many of these are available online for patients to read and are available through public access policies. But I love them because, again, they're very wide in their options.
Which is good, but at
Yeah,
the same time can be totally overwhelming.
100%.
So where I start with patients is like I try to get to the basics, right? And like you do know your body best, and we are like an N of one. Each person is our own individual guinea pig. And so what I have people do usually is like 6 weeks of avoiding gluten and dairy because those are the most likely foods to generate inflammation. And not everybody will feel better with that, right? But some people are like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. Then I have people add back one, gluten. Oh gosh, now my symptoms are really bad again. Take gluten away. Yeah, I feel better. So it's almost like you're doing your own experiment. But I think trying to keep it simple
Yes.
is really helpful. And then getting to know your body. And because of fibro fog, it's important to like write it down, take notes,
Keep a
you know,
diary.
yeah, because otherwise it's like, I don't know. How did I feel off gluten? Like maybe I felt better. And then I talk about increasing foods that help fuel our brain. And in particular, actually, people with fibromyalgia tend to be low on protein. We tend to reach for carbs because we're tired. like everybody in that late afternoon slump is like, I need some sugar, So we tend to reach for carbs. They're easier to prepare, usually prepackaged foods, the stuff that we end up eating because we're too tired to go to the grocery store. But if you increase protein, it fuels our mitochondria, and our mitochondria are what produce energy for our cells, including our muscle cells, our nerve cells, our brain cells. So I have people look at like increasing protein, reducing foods that generate inflammation, and then adding, fruit and veg. We know we all need to eat more of those.
Thank you so much. And that's a really common question that we get asked. I know Diana in our community on Facebook, it's called Life with Fibro, mentioned, like, is the AIP diet the best? Is a Mediterranean diet the best? And what I'm hearing from you is that, there's some good kind of systematic reviews of different diets, but really it's about kind of making that personal and also making it not so taxing. I know AIP has a lot of different restrictions, and just being able to say, hey, we're doing gluten and dairy free. That's just our overall method. So,
and many of the diets like AIP and paleo or Whole30, they really are mostly kind of reducing grains and carbs, avoiding gluten, avoiding dairy. So they're like different flavors, so to speak, of that same type of diet, and whatever kind of you like best. Like I liked the Whole30 diet. I thought that the recipes were good. I felt better. I flamed out on day 17, I'll be honest, because I really wanted chocolate, but I digress. I think that kind of any of the AIP, paleo, Whole30, like that kind of family of diets tend to be quite good. The Mediterranean diet can be good, but it does have more grains and it doesn't have as much protein. So some people don't feel as well on it. So that's kind of my approach.
Thank you. And when we're talking about kind of things to take out of our diets, sometimes we're not talking as much about things to add in. And so Dr. Liptan, you mentioned protein is a big one. In terms of other foods like supplements or additional vitamins, what are some things that we should be thinking about if we're not getting them from food, or should we be getting them from food?
I mean, I'm a big proponent of ensuring the protein for me is a big number one, because as you said, like that is the fuel that gets those mitochondria to work at their best. And, it's interesting because I think a lot of patients, I would say, even I, just growing up, when I thought of protein, I thought of meat. And you don't realize just how many other forms of protein are out there that can be very beneficial to your body. If you think about like a Greek yogurt, which is still kind of a dairy, but it's got a lot of good prebiotics and good stuff in there to help with digestion, but there's a ton of protein in that. You can get plant-based proteins as well. And so understanding that our protein doesn't necessarily have to come in the form of a piece of chicken breast or a piece of meat, that you can look into these other protein sources. I just wanted to point that out. But I also am a huge proponent for making sure we get good fiber intake.
Yes.
Fiber is so important in maintaining good gut health, making sure that we're having regular bowel movements. And those fiber sources are oftentimes in foods that are very healthy anyways to be eating, things like fruits and vegetables, for example.
So I totally agree. I love the protein. Healthy fats are also good. Things like, avocados, things like that. The supplement question is sort of a can of worms, because there are a lot of different supplements that people look at or have heard about for fibromyalgia, but I again try to keep it sort of the basics. I think a high quality multivitamin is pretty good for most of us, because it's sort of like that extra insurance. Like, okay, maybe my diet hasn't been perfect. I'm not getting like as much folic acid or B12 as I should with those leafy greens, but adding that multivitamin, I think, can be very helpful. magnesium is kind of the other basic supplement that I recommend. And in part, that's because we actually don't get enough magnesium from our food. The soil, at least in the US, is really magnesium depleted. So we're supposed to get a lot of magnesium through fruits and vegetables and even grains. But because the soil's depleted, we don't get enough magnesium in our food. And I think that magnesium can also help with gut health. But I usually talk about taking some magnesium like at bedtime. It's relaxing. And for the most part, it's safe to take them, talk to your doctor if you have any kidney issues. But other than that, people can pretty much take, a good dosage of magnesium. So those are kind of the two basic ones. And then you can sort of individualize, if there's specific things that you may be deficient in. Are there other ones that you recommend, Dr. Chadwick, or is that?
Those are definitely my top two. I did kind of want to touch on the magnesium because patients ask me all the time, do I use magnesium citrate? Do I use magnesium oxide? Do I use magnesium glycinate? I mean, if I get overwhelmed in the Target section with the vitamins.
Oh, totally.
And I'm like, okay, so I've got them. They're in pill form. They're giant. There's gummies. There's
there's powders.
First, I'm just going to say the other one I recommend regularly for patients is turmeric, just because it's so anti-inflammatory and is very low risk. So, but let's get back to magnesium.
That's a good one. We do know actually that magnesium oxide is not very well absorbed. So I basically tell people magnesium oxide, you only absorb, I think it's less than 10% of the magnesium in it. Yep. So basically kind of worthless. However, Western medicine, for whatever reason, that is the one that is commonly used, like if you're in the hospital or, where I work now in addiction rehab, that's the one that's on our formulary. Okay, at least you're getting some magnesium, right? Magnesium citrate and glycinate are about equal in absorption. So either of them are good, but magnesium citrate has a laxative effect, which can be desirable or undesirable. Magnesium glycinate is kind of neutral as far as laxative, and it has some additional kind of calming effects because of the glycine molecule. So it's magnesium plus glycine. And that's the one I usually recommend at bedtime. Unless you're constipated, then go for magnesium citrate. So anyway, it is overwhelming though, and there's so many different kinds between powder and different caps and gels, all of that. I don't know which one is better, but I just tell people magnesium oxide just
stay away from
worthless. It. Yeah. And usually people ask dosages. So I will just say anywhere between 300 to 400 of whatever magnesium you're choosing a day is reasonable.
Dr. Chadwick, you mentioned all the powders and pills and gummies, and we had a question from our community about also patches and IV delivery of vitamins or supplements. Could you talk a little bit about that, if that's an option for patients? Is that something they should look into?
So I'm assuming that the question from the community might have to be with some of these IV infusion companies and wellness companies that can come to your home and give you an IV. I am not aware of any additional benefits from the IV form. The beautiful thing about our bodies is it takes what it needs and excretes what it doesn't. So if you're going for these high-powered, massive quantities of vitamins, infusions that some of these wellness companies give, just know that your body's going to take what it needs and excretes the rest. So you may be paying quite a bit for something you don't need. That's my professional view of this. Our body knows exactly what to do. And Ginevra, I would love your insight on this too, but I'm not really aware that IV has any additional properties other than it can be maybe delivered a little faster.
I totally agree. I think it's really expensive. And for kind of a short-term, maybe a short-term benefit, there's a few exceptions. So patients that are gastric bypass patients, people that have some absorptive issue in their GI tract, things like iron infusions can be helpful, but done with your provider, making sure that you're getting tested for it. Every once in a while, B12 injections can be super helpful, but it's really for folks that their GI system isn't working correctly. And for the most part, our system is working mostly correctly, unless we have other medical issues. So yeah, unless there's like gastric bypass or some absorption issue, I don't usually recommend it. For a while, I was recommending the patches because I had some folks that were like, iron upsets my stomach, so I'm going to try these iron patches. And I actually did like a little experiment where I had a patient who was wearing one of them. You know, we tested her iron before, we tested it like after a month of wearing the patches. It was like totally unchanged. So I was not super impressed with that. I mean, that's just like a tiny little bit of data, but unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we absorb things very well as far as nutrients from a patch.
And I think if we can gather one thing from this discussion, that supplements are not controlled and regulated by the
Yes.
FDA, which makes it very difficult for us as physicians to understand the black hole of them that exists out there and be able to recommend properly. What I do tell patients is that they are worried about a specific type of nutritional deficit, whether it be in B12 or vitamin D or certain types of other iron, like you mentioned, that blood tests with your physician can help identify if you have a very true deficiency in them that might require a higher level of medical treatment for that. But just like Dr. Liptan mentioned, you know, our body does take what it needs and excretes the rest. So even taking a regular supplement of something like B12, et cetera, is a very desirable thing to do to ensure that we're trying to replace what our diet might not be getting.
Yep.
But in those true deficiency settings, those would likely need to be kind of evaluated and treated by a physician to ensure that those levels get brought up to an appropriate level.
Yep, I totally agree. And as my part of like basic screening labs with fibromyalgia patients, you know, I look at iron stores, you know, I look to see, is there any deficiency that could benefit from, you know, extra supplementation, particularly for folks that, I don't know, I'm not a fan of gastric bypass, unrelated, because it just seems to really impair people's absorptive capacity. And then fibromyalgia, it's like, that just, I don't know. It seems like it makes it much harder to absorb the nutrients that we need, but I digress. That is a separate conversation. But I think it's important as a fibromyalgia patient to try not to do like 12 things at once. Like I do encourage people to try to make a few variable changes at a time. You know, if I'm adding a new medicine or a supplement, or, you know, if we're removing gluten from the diet, because if you make too many changes at once, you don't know what's causing what, right? So trying to be like scientific about it, and I think people can really kind of wrap their head around that sometimes, like, oh, okay, yeah. And then I need to kind of document to track how I'm doing. Because otherwise, like I know when I first was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, I was like, okay, I need to eat lots of this or none of that, or but you know, you just get like so overwhelmed that you can sort of just be like, I don't know, I'm just gonna eat a cookie, you know, like I can't deal right now.
Yeah, and that was one of my next questions was, okay, let's get real for a second. Like we're all in those moments where it's just like, okay, I need something to eat. I have 5 minutes, or I'm just tired. This is what I have.
What's in the vending machine, you know?
Yes. Are there things like practically just like strategies we can have either like when we're at the store or when we're like setting up our space that allows us to have some of those foods on hand, or just curious how you thought about this, especially as you know you're seeing patients, or Ginevra, when you were writing your book?
Well, what I did in my first book, this one, sorry, shameless self-promotion, was I talked about what kind of diet you should be eating, right? And then I was like, okay, great, people could just do it. And then I realized, like, wow, the actual implementation of the diet is so much harder than knowing what to do. And so then I actually ended up, that's why I wrote the Fibro food formula with a nutritionist, because I was trying to like have practical things patients could do. So some of the top level items are having ready-made protein snacks around. So like boiling a dozen hard-boiled eggs, you've got them there for those moments of hunger. Having some almonds around, having like, there are some energy bars that are pretty good and have some protein. So trying to have protein snacks around that are easy to prepare, not like something that you have to spend a lot of energy on. And then trying to have like pre-cut, like buying pre-cut vegetables. A lot of us, if you're having like arm and neck pain, the idea of like chopping butternut squash, like you're just not going to do it. You know what I mean? You're going to eat something that's a lot easier and already made. So simple things like that, even things like making sure you have sharp knives at home. Like this is something that the nutritionist, when I wrote the book with her, she was like, oh yeah, that's like a huge thing people can do, because if it's sharp, you have to spend less energy cutting the vegetables. And I was like, oh my God, that's like brilliant. Like I never would have thought of that. And now I have this knife that like the sheath, when you put it in there, it like sharpens it. It's like my new favorite thing. I love it. And it makes things chopping healthy food so much easier. So some of those like basic things that we can do to make ourselves more likely to eat healthy, grocery delivery services. There's actually some pretty good paleo food delivery services, at least there are in my area. They can be a little pricier, but it is a way. I encourage people to think of it as medicine. Dr. Chadwick mentioned earlier, food as medicine. So maybe spending money on that rather than some expensive supplement infusions, or, kind of those really practical ready-made things. Even like Amy's frozen foods. Like I've got some great in my freezer, just frozen meals that like, I don't have it tonight to cook. Because if I don't do that, then I'm going to eat popcorn for dinner, which I have been known to do, and not a healthy dinner.
I mean, it's about the simplification of the process, right? I'm a busy mom of two, and I live my life in my car right now, it seems. And one thing I was really struggling with was being able to like prepare a healthy lunch to bring with me to the office.
Right.
And so I would end up going to like the physician lounge and getting, not healthy, like, hot meals from there that were like chicken enchiladas with lots of cheese sauce on top. And then you got the rice and the beans. And you want some queso on the side, Dr. Chadwick? I'm like, yes, I want the queso on the side. But I really, decided this year to kind of revamp my health in terms of my nutrition, because I felt like I had really gotten into a rut. So for me, it's been the simplistic things I could do. So at my local, like kind of like a natural food store, they have these like prepackaged salads that come with like the toppings already in tiny little containers. And maybe it's not the best for our carbon footprint, but for me, it helps me be able to make a healthy salad. And then I I buy like already cooked chicken breasts. And I just bought this like food chopper. Have you seen these food choppers? Oh my God, it's like changed my life. I saw it on TikTok. It's like you can get them anywhere. They're not very expensive, but it's like basically like it looks like a shoebox, and it's got like a lid, and then there's like an insert that's like got like this very sharp like kind of crosshatch thing. And so you literally can just like put your chicken breast on there and slam it, and then you've got like a perfectly diced chicken breast. Same thing with your cucumbers. I mean, I literally can prepare an entire salad in this shoebox and then like toss the dressing in there and like take the lid off, and I can just eat out of the box. Like
Yes.
But it's just these little simple things. Like you said, it's like I have like little stashes of protein bars like all over my purse. I always have something with me. And then, we can't underestimate the power of making sure we're hydrated.
Right.
Like I kind of like have a love-hate relationship with that receptacle, but making sure we're hydrated is also super important, because our kidneys function best. All of our cells are super happy when we're hydrated. And I still believe that a cookie every now and then is okay. Everything in moderation.
Totally agree. And I need to look into this shoebox chopper thing, that's genius because
It's genius.
it's stuff like that. And
But not only does it chop your food, but you get a little bit of your, like, if you have some bad juju you need to let out, you just slam it. Just bam. Oh, it's great.
that's fantastic. Yes.
Not sponsored. This is not an ad.
I know, I was gonna say. Watch
There
your
are
TikTok
many,
channel.
it's just like cars. There's a lot of different models. So you can go online and look for your own non brand name vegetable chopper, food chopper.
Thank you. These are great strategies. And like you said, Dr. Lipton, sometimes, yeah, just the implementation, knowing what to do is the first piece, but getting it incorporated into our lives is kind of the second and sometimes harder bit. So I appreciate you sharing that. And before I get into just some like final round questions, we talked a little bit about things to talk with your healthcare provider about, and that some of the tests that you might be able to take a look at in terms of determining your different levels or blood work that you could request. What else, if someone's going into a doctor visit, could they ask their provider, or should they ask their provider if they're thinking about making a dietary change? Is there anything that their provider should know, or ways that it could impact their current medications that people should be aware of?
I think it's always good to talk about it with your provider, keeping in mind that not all medical providers are as knowledgeable around diet or even, frankly, fibromyalgia, as we all know. So kind of saying, hey, here's what I'm thinking about doing, just so they're sort of on that journey with you. And then if they have any concerns, like, for example, if you're going to eat really high protein levels and you have kidney problems, you definitely would need to talk about your diet with your doctor. So just so they can kind of gauge, hey, is there anything to be concerned about with that diet, or no, go forward. And most doctors are like, yeah, eat more fruit and vegetables, eat more protein. Yes, great. Eat more fiber. Like, it's all stuff that is, for the most part, healthy, I would say. But I do think including them is important. And then talking with them about some basic, like, hey, can we get my iron levels checked, vitamin D, B12, just some basic nutritional things. The one question I get asked a lot is about doing food sensitivity blood work. And Dr. Chadwick, you probably get this question too, like, should I, get the IgG antibody tests, or, there's all these different kind of types of food sensitivity tests. And to my understanding, I don't think there's any great data supporting them per se. I think that it can be interesting to add like an additional component. So for example, if you get the IgG antibody tests, and let's say one value is sky high and it's like soybeans, and you're like, oh, I never thought I was sensitive to soybeans. Let me try avoiding them. Sometimes that is giving us some information, but it's just not like a perfect one-to-one. Yes, that definitely means you're sensitive to soybeans. So I say with a grain of salt, it's good to take that. But I think it's more important and actually better data to do the elimination. I mean, that actually has good data for it, like elimination diets.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Do you know if there's any data supporting that?
I don't think outside of people, they're very expensive. Let's just be honest about these panels. They're not covered by insurance.
No.
So, and like you said, just because you have a value doesn't mean that that's the offending agent. The only way to know is to try. And then if it doesn't work and your symptoms are still the same or whatnot, then it's like, well, you've spent thousands of dollars on blood work and it's maybe not as fruitful. I think, there are true insensitivities. If you think about celiac disease, I mean, those are people who literally cannot have gluten. And they can get very sick if they do.
Right.
But many insensitivities are just, you kind of figure them out on your own. Just like we've kind of talked about during this whole webinar so
Totally.
far. So, you know, if you have the financial means and you're interested in looking at these things, I mean, I say to each his own when it comes to those lab tests, but I don't think we have good like medical evidence from reputable journals saying that these food sensitivity blood work tests are very impactful in the care of the fibromyalgia patient.
I would agree as far as data goes, but I think they're actually some of the panels aren't, they're like just a few $100s. They've gotten a lot cheaper.
Oh, that's good to
And I
know.
feel like if it's interesting for you and let's say you're doing a elimination diet, you've gotten rid of gluten and dairy and notice like no difference. Okay, maybe
Yeah.
that's where I sort of say like, well, okay, maybe there's some unusual thing that we don't think of not a typical sensitivity. Then I look at those antibody tests as sort of like a hint, like
Yeah. A
okay, that
suggestion.
a suggestion. Exactly. It's not like definite you can't eat soybeans. It's like, well, maybe your immune system is overreactive to soybeans. So I think it can be useful
Yeah.
if you're struggling to figure it out just with elimination or other dietary changes. The other just like brief little thing I wanted to say is people talk a lot about leaky gut, and that's something. So part of why we have food sensitivities, we think, is because in fibromyalgia and other conditions characterized by chronic stress, we actually end up with a GI system that's a little bit leaky. So we're letting in food particles to our bloodstream that we shouldn't, that should be staying in our gut. And our immune system is looking at those as foreign invaders. And all of us have differently primed immune systems. And let's say my immune system, when a little gluten particle gets in the bloodstream, my immune system is like, okay, we're attacking. So that means that I would have a food sensitivity, but you can actually work on healing and improving your gut health. And then you actually can improve from and actually lessen or even eliminate that food sensitivity. So leaky gut used to be something that was only in the realm of like naturopaths and super weirdo doctors like me, and I was talking about it like 20 years ago, and people would look at me like I was crazy. Like, in Western medicine, they were like, there's no such thing. But there actually is good data now, both in animal and human studies, that leaky gut is a thing. And I have had some even GI doctors like that I never would have thought, like actually say, hey, this person had leaky gut. And I was like, what? So I think it is becoming more and more understood as like, yeah, okay, that can be a player for some people. But it's definitely not like 100, I would say it's like maybe 30% accepted where it used to be like 0%. I don't know if you've seen people, in Western medicine talking about leaky gut with like legitimate.
Very rarely.
Yeah, I would say.
It's
But stay tuned. It's going to
But
change. It's going to
yeah,
keep
I mean, but
changing.
this is where research is just so important. I mean, there's still so much about the human body that we don't understand. And what we do understand is the importance of the microbiome that we, are essentially born with and
Right.
then develop over time. But just like you were mentioning, the idea of fetal stress, due to maternal stress during the pregnancy, stress as we grow up, and how that can all alter the not only the microbiome makeup, but also the permeability
Mhm.
of the intestinal linings. And for those out there, permeability means what can get through, how easy is it to get through. So that's really that concept of leaky gut is altered permeability, which is likely due to changes in our microbiome, chronic stress changes on the functioning of the cells. So, you know,
High
reducing
doses
stress.
of NSAIDs, actually,
Yes.
like ibuprofen, things like that. I actually do talk a lot about how to heal leaky gut in the FibroManual, my book, because I think for some people it's pretty important.
Yeah.
Um, but again, yeah, your doctor, if you like your primary care doctor, if you talk about it, they might be like, I don't think that's a thing. So just know that it's not like widely accepted, but we're getting there. Um, and then the only other kind of diet thing that people ask me a lot about, so I thought maybe somebody out there might be interested, is about the keto diet for fibromyalgia. So keto is like very low carb, high fats, moderate to high protein. Um, some people with fibromyalgia seem to feel really good on that diet. And I couldn't figure that out for a while. I was like, well, is it reducing inflammation? Like, what's that? I don't get it. But what I've been kind of reading about is that they think it reduces the glutamate levels in our brain. And glutamate is that excitatory kind of accelerator chemical that can amplify pain for some people. It has good data in like epilepsy, like hard to control epilepsy. Keto diet actually reduces the glutamate,
Yeah.
kind of excitatory transmission. So that's like my personal theory as to like maybe why it's helping. But I will say I tried the keto diet and felt terrible. Like it was just not for me at all. My body was like, nope. So I don't think it's for everybody, but some people feel really good. But that one I really would talk to your doctor about. I think it's a bit hard on the body. You want to make sure that you're in good enough shape and that you're doing it healthfully, not too strictly.
Quick question before we wrap up, just on kind of gut health, since we were talking about it. Someone had a question about apple cider vinegar. I feel like we hear that in terms of like gut health a lot. Is that something that you've tried yourself, Dr. Liptan, or seen with other patients? I know kind of taking a shot of apple cider vinegar in the morning sometimes is a great way to start the day. I don't know. I haven't tried.
Yeah, no, I know people, that's like one of those trendy things that I think will happen. I have not ever seen it to be helpful, nor do I really understand. I have to be honest, like I don't quite understand how it would help gut health, but some people swear by it. So I don't know. It's one of those, like, to me, it seems like a little bit of an old wives' tale, like, like it's past the new castor oil or whatever, but I don't think there's any harm in it.
It might just be another bag of gummies that you may or may not find any benefit from.
I think probiotics are really helpful though. That is another kind of supplement I do recommend, particularly if folks have a lot of IBS symptoms. Not everybody with fibromyalgia it's, I think about a good 2/3 of us have IBS, but it's not something that everybody deals with, or it's not that severe for everybody. So I think probiotics for the most part are pretty good. I have had people get like super expensive stool tests where they like look at all the different like types of bacterial strains and then see which ones are like out of balance. And I think that is going to be like some precision medicine as we go forward. Like, no, you need this specific, bacteria to really balance things out. Like, I think that's like really cool and interesting, but it's not something that I've been recommending yet because I don't think we're quite there. But a lot of naturopaths do that testing.
Definitely. And I would say I'm wrapping up being a principal investigator here at the University of Kansas for a nationwide study on chronic low back pain. And one of our omics that we got was stool samples. So we'll, nationwide be looking at whether or not there's certain types of microbiome alterations that are seen in patients with chronic low back pain. So the microbiome is a very I would say rooted in a lot of evidence base. It's very hot in the research world right now. So more to come there, but I would agree with you that I think for all of those tests, that could be a definite cool one. The question is how to interpret it. I would have no idea.
Totally. Let me just say that I think that you do really cool research, and no, seriously, all of us with fibromyalgia, like we should be when people are paying attention to folks with chronic pain or fibromyalgia, researchers bringing attention to it, like that is just so amazing and is globally going to help us. So thank you, Dr. Chadwick.
You're welcome. And call your local government officials and tell them how much you want NIH funding for fibromyalgia to increase across the board.
Yes, agreed.
Advocate for yourself and your community.
Yes, agreed. I totally think that's a good point. And one brief thing, the Fibro food formula is available if you go to my website, drginevra.com, and sign up for my newsletter. It's like a PDF download thingamabobber, if that's something that people are interested in. And free is always good. It's a nice price.
Thank you so much. We're going to have to reconvene once, Dr. Chadwick, you have your research further along to learn kind of what you're seeing. And Dr. Liptan, always such a pleasure to have you and bringing all of your expertise. Please go to Dr. Ginevra and check her out. Also, thanks to everyone who submitted questions for this webinar. Again, we ask for questions in our forum on Facebook. It's a private community, and people are welcome to share their experience and to connect with others who have fibro there. So that's A Life with Fibro on Facebook. And we're Swing Care. We're a comprehensive telehealth clinic for fibromyalgia. So if you're looking for more advice or want to speak with a fibromyalgia clinician, I recommend checking us out there too. It's at swing.care. And
what states are you guys in?
Yeah, thank you for asking.
I get asked that a lot, and I'm like, I don't remember. So
yeah, we're a growing clinic. So right now we're in Texas, Ohio, Missouri, Illinois, Tennessee, and Michigan's our most recent. So
that's
yeah,
awesome. Yay.
Excited to grow and see more folks, because I know not everyone has an awesome fibromyalgia expert like Dr. Liptan available where they are. So Dr. Chadwick, thank you again for being with us as always. Our medical director and resident fibromyalgia researcher. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. And we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.